content here. Okay. So again, my name is Mrs. Tyre. I'm an English teacher at Provo High. I've taught at Provo High. This is my 6th year, and then I student taught here as well. And I just do a lot of this ACT prep with my English students and get a lot of feedback from them. So I'll be referring to them like I was during the reading. But the English section is next. This section is a little bit longer. It's 75 questions, which is a lot. And you have 45 minutes. However, a lot of my students, different from the reading section, but a lot of my students, when we do the practice English tests in my English classes, they finish with plenty of time. Like some of my students have 5-10 minutes at the end. So don't get too intimidated with that being 75 questions in 45 minutes. The English moves quickly, and unlike the reading section, I have a lot of students who don't feel like they're as rushed in the English section as they are in the other sections. So that, just kind of be aware of that. All right, so the English section, there's a lot of text on this slide, and I don't think you need to write it all down by any means. Again, Helen can send you guys these PowerPoints, so you can take notes if you'd like, but you'll have it. They kind of divide them up this way. So they say they've got 10 questions on just punctuation, and we'll be talking about some of that more tricky punctuation type questions today. And so they just want to know that you know how to use commas and dashes and semicolons, and like, again, we'll be going over that. That's 10 whole questions, just punctuation. So that's something worth studying. 12 grammar usage questions. And so these are kind of the different things, how you use adverbs, making sure, think about like your foreign language classes, making sure that the verbs are conjugated the correct way, stuff like that. Sentence structure, which is kind of grammar and usage-esque. Let's see here, I'll get my laser pointer. What they call strategy questions. These I like to think of more as all 3 of these on this slide, I like to think of more as like the writing questions. It still is very grammar focused, but it's a lot on like, think of like revision. So they're wanting you to notice what is off, or what is repetitive, or what needs to be tweaked, or what is irrelevant and makes no sense in the passage. So it's almost like they're wanting you to go in as like an editor and revise this passage. And that's what these types of questions are. So adding, revising, deleting sentences, thinking about audience, right? They're going to ask you some comprehension, like it says the focus of the paragraph or the essay. They're going to make you pay attention to opening and closing phrases, right? Writing style, so that's going to be tone, eliminating ambiguity, wordiness, all of that. So you've got like the very grammar type stuff here, but you also have a lot of like writing knowledge type questions. So English is not just, the English section is not just grammar. That's the stuff that trips kids up. So that's what you study a lot. It's a little harder to study for these types of questions, but the English teacher in me wants to just say, hopefully you were listening in your English class when they had those writing units, right? And that you were just kind of paying attention to kind of those revision and editing strategies that your English teacher would go over, all right? So that's just kind of an overview. Again, I like to give you guys kind of a visual of what this section kind of looks like. So it'll have a passage on the side, and then it'll have...
Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
request me to go back a couple slides.
Yeah, of course. This one?
I am not entirely sure. Look at the chat.
Oh, are you in the chat? Sorry, with my share screening, I can't quite see it. So what slide did they need? Will someone just tell me, because I can't quite see the chat.
I think the one after that one.
One with the questions.
The one with the questions? Is that what someone said? Let me see if I can see.
Go back.
One more.
The first one.
The first one. That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this is like the grammar type stuff, right? And these are what we're going to be focusing on today. So the majority of my PowerPoint is going to be just little grammar tricks on like the 19 most common missed grammar questions in the English section. So a lot of these we're going to go more in depth. And Helen, I have a handout, so maybe I'll send you, I need to send you that too. If we would have done this in person, I usually bring copies and pass it out to you guys, but I can I can bring that handout. I can email
Can you
that.
show the next one too?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And some of these categories, I don't know, I'm like, there's a lot of overlap, right? Like if you think about some of the things that they have in here, I could see some of these being like some of the style questions also being strategy questions, so it's a little ambiguous how they delineated all of that, but this is roughly what you'll have. And it's helpful, I think, to know how many of the questions, right? That's helpful. But overall, I just kind of wanted to show you guys that a chunk of the English section is grammar heavy and a chunk of it is more like revision heavy. Okay, so that's kind of what this is breaking down for you and telling you guys. All right, does anyone need another couple seconds on this slide, or am I good to move forward? You'll have to unmute yourself and let me know if you want me to stay.
I'm okay.
Okay, I can always go back. So here's kind of a sample passage, all right? So you'll have a passage, and just like you can see here, you'll have the underlined like sentence in the passage with the question number underneath. So question number 2 is relating just that word. Question number 3 is going to ask you about that. And so that's part of the reason it moves so quickly is, yes, you're jumping between question and passage, but that jumping is made a little easy for you because they just mark it so clearly for you. And then you'll notice one of the first things that's, I think, unique to the English section is every question, almost every single one, will have a no change option. And so we'll talk about that a little bit, but that's probably something that you notice. So they'll just want you to recognize how to fix, essentially, whether it's a grammatical error or whether it's just that word doesn't make sense, or why do they say that? They said that literal same thing in the previous sentence. Those are the kind of things they're wanting you to notice. Okay, so these kind of questions will give you an idea, right? So they want you to be able to read this sentence: the rare triangular snowflake similarly confounded scientists for years because it apparently defied the basic laws of chemistry. So they're wanting you to know they want to know that you understand that you can take out similarly and if any of these would work, right? Or if similarly makes the most sense. So they're just kind of wanting at a sentence level to really gauge, I guess, like your understanding of the English language, right? And what makes the most sense. But that kind of gives you a rough idea of how these questions, like these grammar concepts that we're going to be talking about, what they look like in question form. And sometimes it's tiny little things, right? Like if you look at number 5 and number 6, those are just little things that they're just wondering. But there is, I mean, according to ACT, there's like a clear right answer that's like grammatically correct, or like the right answer, right? It's not just, oh, you're the writer and you decide what you want to say. Like they're trying to keep it less ambiguous than that, right? Which is a hard thing to do. And some of the questions on ACT, I'm like, I don't know. But for the most part, if you really study, there should be a clear answer that should stand out to you. And that's why you're here today, right? So that gives you a little bit of an idea. So the research shows for the English section that majority of the section, like multiple questions throughout the whole test, are having you look for these 2 orange bullets that they're looking for have you notice in the passage irrelevant information that has nothing to do with the rest of the passage. Like, why are we talking about that? And I always tell my students that you guys are really good at picking up on that because you have been in a high school classroom and you have teachers who just go on tangents about nothing that's related to what they're doing. And some of you know like really well how to like keep them going on those tangents, right? Like, you know what they're interested in and you just keep asking about this thing that they're interested in and they're excited to talk about it. So you guys should be able to recognize that in the passage, that just be like, whoa, hang on, this sentence completely has nothing to do with it, right? But also long-windedness, which is kind of a weird word. And I don't actually know if it has a dash there, if that's a word, for real, who knows? But basically they want you to notice if something can be said with less words, right? If it can be more concise. that like, so what they'll have is oftentimes they'll have a sentence and then they'll have something underlined, and it'll like, one of the options will just be like delete it. And if that sentence still makes perfect sense and there's not like information that's being missed, if you delete that, that's what they're wanting you to notice, is they can say this with way less words. We don't need to have that chunk, or they don't need to repeat it in this next sentence. So irrelevant information, but also repetition and this long-windedness is what they especially are paying attention to. All right. Now, no change can be the right answer. And you guys seeing on this slide how many no changes there are. If those were never the right answer, they wouldn't have it as an option in so many questions, right? But that is common. So like, don't think like, oh, I've had like quite a few no changes. That's really common. So just be aware of that there are going to be questions where no change, where it's like, no, I wouldn't use any of this B, C, or D. Like, I like what's in there already, right? Be looking for moments like that as well, okay? So then with these two orange bullet points in mind, what a lot of kids do to save time, which can hurt you, is they only read the sentences that have an underline. So let's see if we have any sentences. Yeah, not quite. This is an example where technically if we go from period to period, every sentence in this passage has a question in it. But you will have like one sentence, or like, here's kind of a good example. It's like a long sentence and there's only one word. A lot of kids just will not even read it, not even skim the lines in between. But a lot of the questions are having you look for irrelevant information. So you still need to get a feel for what the passage is talking about, and long-windedness. So if they've already said it, right? If they're repeating themselves, you need to recognize that, which means you need to kind of read those passages. But you also need to know if it's irrelevant. So be sure you read all of the questions. You can skim them and be quick about it, right? But the research shows that, yeah, it does take a little bit more time, but students are much more likely to get the questions correct if they actually read in between. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Also, just a reminder, guys, I'm trying to play around. Maybe there's a way I can see the chat, but I haven't figured it out yet. So again, feel free to just cut in. I'll do some questions at the end. I'll get out of my PowerPoint and answer questions so I can see your chat. But if you've got a question kind of right in the middle, just jump in and unmute yourself and let me know, okay? All right, so this is something that came out a few years ago, but it still is pretty commonly the most missed types of grammar questions. And so, like I said, the revision writing type questions are a little bit hard to study for. The best way I think to study for those questions is do the practice test, do an English practice test. But it's hard to just like study and refresh and have flashcards or something like that type of studying for like revision, right? Like that's just kind of a skill that you need to see in the context, and the best way to do that is to take a practice test. So what I like to focus on when I'm teaching English section is the grammar, because those are things I can just quickly go over and refresh, like the grammar rule, and then I can recognize it in the question if that's what the question's asking about. So that's what we are going to focus on today. All right, so you can feel more prepared for the grammar, because that's a lot of times what kids are more stressed out about, and that's oftentimes what hurts kids' score in the English section more than the writing revision questions. Okay, so again, you'll have these. There's 19 of them, so I'm going to move probably a little quicker than some of you are wanting, but you're going to have this PowerPoint, so just keep that in mind. And honestly, guys, I wouldn't mind if there's a few of you who want the PowerPoint this weekend. I'll check my email this afternoon. I'm not going to be checking it all night, but you guys could go to the Provo High School website, go to the English teachers on the Provo High School website, find my email and email me, and I can send you the PowerPoint too. But so for some of you who really want to spend more time on this today.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, how often is the answer going to be no change? Because, well, yeah, I don't know. Because I feel
Yeah, it's hard.
in
I
the other
haven't
tests,
found.
this
Yeah, I
seems
haven't
never
found.
that, but
Yeah, I haven't found like a percentage, and partially that's because every ACT test is different. Like the practice ones are different, and every year they've got multiple that kids take, and so
yeah.
It's hard to know. I've Googled that before, but it's been a little while. You could try and Googling it again, but I think it changes. That's part of the reason that it would be hard to find that answer, is because it just depends on their test and they're going to be switching it up. So it's not one of those things like we have this many on every test. I don't think they follow those rules, but it's a common answer. And some kids feel like it just the feel of it, it probably isn't common, but it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Thank you.
yeah. Sorry, that's kind of like a non-answer to your
It's all
question.
good.
But
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Okay. Oh yeah, I forgot I've got all my weird little things in here. Okay, so on this list, I've starred certain grammar things, these like 19 common errors. And when they're starred, that's because I think they're extra tricky, because we say it wrong all the time, but technically it's grammatically incorrect. And so things that we say wrong grammar-wise are going to be way harder to catch, because it's going to feel right, because we've heard it said wrong all the time. So, I mean, if you guys are fluent English speakers, which I'm assuming you are because you're understanding everything I say, but even if English isn't your first language, if you know English, you can communicate in English, you're able to keep up with this ACT prep fine, that's going to be a huge advantage, because certain grammar rules that ACT is going to test you on aren't going to have these stars next to them. And so you're going to just hear it and be like, oh, like that's not how we say that. And that sounds awkward and that sounds wrong. And that's going to help you catch it. But there's going to be a few of these really commonly missed questions that sound wrong. Sound right, but we say it wrong. So this is a good example. So I'll use this example as context. So singular and plural, and this actually was just changed. Technically, like in dictionaries and in MLA and like some of the big grammar people, they actually just changed this, but I would be surprised. ACT hasn't said they're planning to change it yet, but maybe next year they will. So just kind of keep that in mind. But before like this year, all the grammarians, which sounds like I can just feel bad for those people that they're a grammarian, like that's their job. I just think that's such a funny word. But all the grammarians, all the grammar experts, they're called grammarians, have agreed, and it's agreed upon in the English language until just now, that they is always plural, okay? Until recently, right? With pronouns kind of having a revolution. So it is wrong to say if a student, which is singular one, won't study, they, which is technically, according to grammarians, plural, they won't do well. But we say it like that all the time, right? We say they to refer to one specific individual all the time. So that's one that on ACT you're going to want to be careful for, because it'll sound right, but it's actually wrong. So it's right to say if students won't study, right? Students with the S, so now it's plural instead of singular up here, they won't do well. Or if a student won't study, he or she won't do well. So you can kind of piece that together, and maybe why this is feeling like an outdated term with like the gender revolution.
I'm gonna stop you for a second.
Yeah,
I get what you're talking about, but in regards to singular thing, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, they trace it back to 1375.
Yeah.
And so it hasn't been a revolutionary thing. It's just people thought it was a thing and then didn't think it was a thing for a while.
Agreed.
And then it's resurfaced.
Agreed.
But I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Where it's just, I think finally experts are going back to that, right? And being like, this doesn't make sense. Why are we doing this? Yeah. And it could be stemmed from a lot of different things. And I hope ACT changes it. I think they should, not only because it should reflect, right, all these like MLA and all of these grammarians that are saying it should be changed, and how they've just kind of announced that more recently. That should be the case. And I'm hoping ACT reflects that. But I also won't be surprised if ACT keeps it this way, because they have lots of stupid grammar things that I don't think are how we speak anymore. So I'm with you. And thank you. I appreciate that context.
So on the ACT, they is always plural, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless they make an announcement, right? But that is how they have always had it. And you get this question wrong if you used they in the singular, but hopefully that changes.
Yeah.
So that would be something to maybe just look for, or Google really quickly, like has ACT, you know, and see if there's some news, because I think it would be news. I think they'd want that to nationally get out, like, hey, you know, because it would change all their, if you have a 2018 ACT prep book and they decide to in 2021 change that, right, they'd want to announce to everyone. So I think it'll be announced. It just hasn't, I haven't seen anything yet. So just keep that in mind. All right, the second one is start as well, because again, we say it technically wrong, right? When the right way we don't really hear as often. And this one's a little bit tricky. So this is dealing with compound subjects. And guys, you don't need to like know all of the grammar stuff behind this. I'm just trying to like simplify it so you just kind of can just refresh and review, and you don't need to like over understand all the like linguistics behind this, right? But if you're interested in that, you can always dig, but I think most people aren't. So this isn't with a specific type of sentence where we have two subjects that are always going to be like at the end of the sentence or the end of the phrase, okay? So it's always going to be similar to this example sentence that I have here. So it's wrong to say the fool gave the wrong tickets to Bob and I. All right, I is technically the subject, and it can't be the object of the preposition to. Again, that's the grammar stuff that we were like, wait, what? Don't worry about it. But it's right to say the fool gave the wrong tickets to Bob and me. And I think that sounds a little weird to us, like the fool gave the wrong tickets to Bob and me. Here's the little hint, and I would focus on this more than like this line up here, that you try dropping the rest of the list. And with compound subjects, it's going to be kind of a list always like that. So if you just cover up Bob and, so the first subject in this list, if you just kind of cover that up, then in the quotation marks and you read it out loud and you just say, the fool gave the wrong tickets and I'm going to skip Bob and me. That sounds correct, right? The fool gave the wrong tickets to me. But if you were to put I, it sounds weird, right? The fool gave the wrong tickets to I. So that's the little hint that ACT gives you. That's the hint that's in ACT prep books for this specific compound subjects, because the types of sentences with compound subjects, they're going to give you on the test. This little trick works, okay? So you'll just take out the first one and then you just read it with just the I or the me at the end. And there will be sometimes where it'll just sound weird. And so that's the hint. So the fool gave the wrong tickets to Bob and I. It might sound okay. It might even sound like a little proper, right? But if you delete this, then re-say it, and then that'll help you decide what it should be, okay? So you'll have a question where you'd have a sentence like this, and this part would be underlined, right? And it would ask you to fix it or keep it the same, right? And they're expecting you to know if it's good as is or what you need to fix, how you need to fix it. And that's the little trick. It's just delete, just cover up those that first subject and then the compound sentence, and then you can do it. Okay, so those are the first two. All right. Okay, this next one is commas and dashes, and this is specifically in the context of parenthetical phrases. So essentially all you need to remember with these questions, and there'll be a couple of these, it just needs to match. And I think what trips these kids up is they don't study for the English section and they feel nervous about a comma because there's so many rules with commas, okay? But specifically with this type of ACT question, it's not always this way, but the sentences they're going to give you, they're looking for it to match, okay? So you have Bob on his way to the store, it's in a positive, saw a lizard. And essentially this either needs to be a comma right here, or this needs to be a dash. It just needs to match. And essentially this is a phrase that's unnecessary. You could take this out. Bob saw a lizard is a complete sentence. And so anytime you have a phrase that's just thrown in there that gives you a little bit more information, that's called an appositive. And appositives have to either both be started and ended with dashes or with commas, and they'll do that a lot. They'll give you like one dash and one comma, and you just need to remember it needs to match. So that's an easier one, I think, to remember, but it does trip kids up all the time, but it probably won't for you guys since you're here today. The next one is commas, but it's specifically with run-ons and comma splices. All right, so we kept it really, really short so you guys can see the difference. So we have Ed's a slacker. Now, this is tricky, but this is a complete sentence. Our verb is right here, right? Ed's a slacker is really saying Ed is a slacker, and is a to be verb, right? So Ed's a slacker is a complete sentence. Sarah isn't is also a complete sentence because we have our subject and we have our verb. Okay, so run-ons and comma splices, they're really going to demand that you can recognize a complete sentence or an incomplete sentence. And so you just need to remember, if it has a subject, if it has a verb, it's a complete sentence. Okay, and if it's an incomplete sentence, then that's going to be different. That's going to be a fragment, right? So that might be something you want to look up and study a little bit. Is like independent clause is a fancy way of saying a complete sentence. So you can look up independent clause, dependent clause, or complete sentence fragment, whichever phrase you're more familiar with. So we have Ed's a slacker. That's a sentence, independent clause. Sarah isn't, also a sentence and an independent clause. Those cannot be combined with a comma, okay? So that is a comma splice, all right? That's what we call a comma splice. You don't really need to know that, but so that's why this is wrong. So if you have these exact same sentences, you can, like if they're similar and they're related, right? Ed's a slacker, Sarah isn't. Those are kind of in like the same breath, the same idea. They're very related because we have this word slacker that's kind of alluding to this word isn't, right? You can do a period or a semicolon. All right. So two complete sentences can be divided by a semicolon, which we don't see very often. People are afraid of semicolons because they don't know how to use them, but they can be divided by a semicolon. I think of it as like a hard comma. So it's like a comma, but you're not allowed to use a comma there, but you don't want to use a period because those two are so related. Like maybe a period is too like defining, right? Like just separates them a little too harshly. This is getting all into like English style and stuff, right? But all you need to know is a semicolon can combine two complete sentences, a comma can't, okay? But as soon as we put in a but, it becomes a dependent clause. But Sarah isn't is no longer a complete sentence. This but is dependent, right? It can't really stand alone. But Sarah isn't. Okay? So anytime they put like any type of word in there that makes it dependent, that changes it. So that can be an option that they have, is they have these, maybe this is what's in the passage, but then one of the answers they throw in a but and it's with a comma. It's fine, okay? Because this is no longer can stand alone as a complete sentence. So that's commas, and that's a tricky one. When people are like afraid of commas, because your elementary teacher probably told you every time there's a natural pause, you put a comma. That's what I was taught, and that's not correct. It's like maybe a good starting place in elementary school, maybe, but it just trips us up later. And so they're wanting you to recognize when it's grammatically correct to have a comma and when it's not. And if you guys just Google like run-ons and comma splices, they'll have tons more examples. I'm just trying to keep this short and sweet for you guys. Okay, so then we have fragments.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please jump in.
For the English test, is there ever more than one answer?
No.
That could be right.
Oh, like is there an answer like that's like A and B are correct?
Right, and if you pick one,
asking?
you still get it right or something.
I don't think
Like,
I don't think it'll be that way. Like I don't think that like on their key they'll be like, if the kid says A or C, we'll give it to them. I think if there are going to be, I'm trying to think about my practice tests that I do with my kids. But there might be like an answer. So it would say like D, A and B are correct, but I don't know for sure. But it won't be like B is a separate answer, C is a separate answer. It would be like, there would be a separate line that said A.
oh, okay, that makes sense.
Are you kind of, I wish I could like map that out for you.
That,
so it won't be like,
helps.
oh, if they say A is a separate answer, B, both are correct, it'll be like C says A and B. Does that make sense? But
yep, thank you.
I don't know, just straight off the top of my head, I'd have to flip through a practice test and like double check if those types of answers, A and B, are correct. If those are in the English section, I don't know 100%. You guys have good questions. Okay, so fragment. This is again going back to kind of related to number 4. So it's wrong to say Emily listened to music, period, while she studied. These are these owubis words, okay, which but is one of them as well. That's why but makes this sentence a dependent clause. So anytime there's an owubis, maybe your teachers have taught owubis, maybe they haven't, but anytime there's an after, as, though, when, you know, especially at the beginning of a clause, right? Because there can be after, like after dark or something, and that might not make it dependent. But if this is the first word in a clause, it makes it dependent. It's no longer a complete sentence. Okay, so Emily listened to music is a complete sentence. Even Emily listened, period, is a complete sentence. You've got subject, Emily, verb, listened. Okay, and yeah, there's she studied, but that's what they're trying to trick you up on, is they want you to know that there are certain words you can throw into a complete sentence and all of a sudden they're not complete anymore. Oh, there goes my light. There we go. I need to get my robot. Okay, so that's what they're trying to trick you up on, that sometimes there's an exception, and that's the exception to the rule is, yeah, you've got a subject and a verb, good job, but we're hoping that you know that this word while, or this word before, or this word since makes it not complete sentence. Okay, so that's something that I think would be like just learning owubis. That weird acronym. Maybe some of you are familiar with that, and some of you are like, that is so weird, but it's helpful. So that's what this is going on, and then that'll help you with these commas and run-ons and when to use a semicolon as well. So really, guys, a big thing for you to maybe watch a couple YouTube videos on and refresh is, how do you know if something's a complete sentence? Okay, and that's something you need to be confident with. If you know that you're like, yeah, when I think about my essays, I have comments or like feedback from my teacher all the time. It's like, run on, run on, run on. And you already know that about yourself, that's going to hurt you in the English section. So just spend some time refreshing and studying that. And it really just comes down to knowing if something's a complete sentence or not. Okay. All right, our next one is punctuation marks. These are the different punctuation marks that they are going to quiz you on. Some of them are going to be really straightforward and some of them aren't. You can Google all the different uses of a comma, but the ones that are really like the ones that trip kids up, how to correctly use a comma, I'm going to talk about today. We've already talked about comma splices and things like that. That's really the big ones that they're going to be looking for. So you can study beyond that. You can go in a little bit more in depth if you need to, but I'm trying to give you just kind of like the quick and dirty version, right, of this, and not going into tons of depth. A lot of these other ones, I think you guys know. You know when to use a colon often, right, before you're starting a list, or question mark, exclamation point, period, like you guys know. The semicolon and the comma, I think, are the most difficult, but those are embedded in some of these other things we're talking about today. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Number 7 is adverbs. All right, so an adverb is just what I think of as an adjective for a verb. It's just explaining a verb. It's a description for a verb. Okay, so this is one where it's like, you speak English fluently, this is going to sound wrong, and you're going to pick up easily how this to fix this and why this is even written the wrong way, right? So it should sound weird saying Anna is an extreme gifted child and she speaks beautiful too, right? Like that should just sound uncomfortable and be a signal to you that like, oh, maybe they're learning English, you know, because if you're familiar with English, if you've grown up with English at school and or in your home, that's going to sound a little weird to you. So they're hoping that you'll recognize where we need to say Anna is an extremely gifted child, right? And she speaks beautifully too. These are adverbs. Most adverbs, I think maybe even 100% of them, don't quote me on that, all have ly. So extremely gifted, right? They're talking about gifted, which is the verb. Speaks beautifully, right? Beautifully is talking about how she speaks. So it's describing the verb in the clause. Okay, so again, that's a little more straightforward, easy one. This next one is starred because we say this wrong all the time. This is one of those like grammar things that like grammar Nazis care about and literally no one else does except for grammar Nazis and ACT apparently. So, but if you just kind of remember this, good can only be applied to nouns. She's a good dog, right? Oh, that's a good plant for an indoor plant. Okay, so you have a noun, a person, place, or a thing can be good. But if we ever say well, it's a verb. So even like she is doing well, right? Doing is the verb, and well technically applies to doing. We don't say she's well, right? She's doing well. And so just kind of remember that. And this helps me a little bit. W is late in the alphabet and V is late in the alphabet. So that's just, maybe your brain works like my brain, but that helps me think of it, where G and N are like in the first half of the alphabet and W and V are in the last half of the alphabet. So that just helps me like chunk them together. Okay. So well is verbs, good nouns. So Joe did good on the ACT, right? We hear that often, like they did good, especially in my family. My parents say that all the time, but it's well. He did well. Okay, so that's kind of an easy rule. We hear it wrong all the time, so be careful with it. But once you memorize the placement and kind of how they go together, it's easy to remember, I think. Okay, this is one that is only going to be one question if it's even on the ACT at all. Okay. So this is not one that I think is worth me really breaking down for you, because it would just be spending so much time on something that's really confusing and it might not even be on the test, okay? But if it is on the test, they only have one question. Now, depending on my kids, that they like to be like, well, if this is the type of question that every other kid is going to miss, but I'm going to get it right, that's one, and so they like to like really study those really hard. And then I have a lot of kids who are like, oh, I'm not going to waste my energy, like that's just going to stress me out, I have too many other things in my brain after today. So you can decide how to approach this. All right. But in my PowerPoint, I've got a link if you really want to study this a little bit more. This Britannica website breaks it down so easily for you, and it would take me so long to teach it to you for you guys to get it, and I just don't think it's worth it. So that's why I just kind of put a link in there. But essentially, if this sentence makes sense to you, even though it's a little bit of a tongue twister, this is the correct usage of it. Sorry, I'm trying to move my little video so I can read it. Okay, I'm gonna miss some words. It's cut off and my laser pointer. Let me see, maybe that's what's doing it. Just trying to cover this. There we go. So this is all the correct usage. I lied, told a lie. I said I had lain down, but I hadn't. In fact, I had just laid the pencil down. After I lied, though, I laid down to repent for having lied. So all of this, you guys, is like past and present and past perfect tense. It's all the different tenses. You just have so many past tense, lain, laid, lay, like it's all tenses. And it's super convoluted and confusing to where it's just obnoxious. And if that's something you would like more info on, I gave you a link, but I don't think it's worth our time to really jump into it today. You guys have already had too long of a day, okay? The next one, these are prepositions. These are ones that I think if you speak English fluently, you are going to get it. And you're just going to hear that it's wrong. So it's wrong to say she tried to instill on me a respect to the law. So that on and that to should sound a little clunky and a little weird to you, right? But this is really, really common for people where English is not their first language, because English has really stupid rules regarding prepositions. And so other languages, even other Latin languages, like don't have the same rules regarding prepositions that we do. And so this is actually a signal to me. I see this a lot in my students' writing where I know that English is their second language. So if this is something that you already know, you maybe struggle with, this would be something worth studying. But for a lot of you, I think you'll be like, oh yeah, I know exactly where I should use to instead of in or for and of, and that might not be something you switch up. So instead, right, this sentence should be, she tried to instill in me a respect for the law. And there's just not a whole lot of rhyme or reason to that. You can look up all the laws of prepositions, but a lot of you, I think it'll be enough that it just sounds weird, okay? Okay, number 11, this is another one that we just don't really say. Like the only people who use whom I feel like are people I don't like. So sorry if you're one of those and you use whom and you're like really strict about this, but people who like use whom, it's like Ross Geller, like, right? Like, I just don't want them in my life. I just don't care enough about it. But it is going to be on the ACT. This is a similar one where there will be one, maybe two questions. There usually is one. And it's also one that is just like so confusing. And there's like all these grammar rules, and you can like study when to use who and whom, and it's not easy to remember. Anyways, so this YouTube video gives you more information, but it also explains this little rule. But if you guys have a ton of questions on this, I would just watch this YouTube video. I don't understand it super well, mostly because I don't care, and ACT shouldn't care either. And I'm hoping this is one of the things that ACT just gets rid of, because it just doesn't apply and none of us use it anyway. But they haven't yet. It's on the ACT. So if you want more information after I go over this, just watch this YouTube video or Google it. But again, this is going to be at most be 2 questions and no more than that. So it's wrong to say always remember who you're speaking to. Again, the thing that might not sound grammatically incorrect to you, right? But it technically is. This is one of the times where we use whom. And so they have a rule where they say, take the sentence and turn it into a question, like have a response type question. So in this context, it would be always remember who you're speaking to who. And then if you answer that question with a him, I know it's gendered and it's a man, of course, but we'll let that go. Speaking to him, right? And if you answer this question, speaking to who with a him, and it sounds weird to say speaking to he, right? Because there are going to be times where he spoke would be like maybe a different example, right? Where it would be who spoke, he spoke, then you would need who. But this one is an example where we need whom, because it was speaking to who, speaking to him, which is our signal that we need whom. Okay, so again, I know that's like, wait, what? Like you might not fully get it, and I'm with you. But this is again just kind of one of those ACT suggests, like, don't worry about studying all the grammar behind this rule. Just like keep this in mind and try and like ask a question right after the sentence with the main verb, and that'll help you like guess at least, right? But again, I wouldn't get too hung up on this. If you're really interested and you're one of those kids where it's like, well, I want to get the whom questions right because those are going to be the 2 that other kids get wrong, then that's fine. But I don't understand this rule well enough to break all of that down, and it's also a time issue. So here's the YouTube video for you. Okay. All right, number 12, it or its. This is one where ACT is going to try and trick you. It's right here does not exist, but that will be an answer. They will have that, and it makes me so mad. It's like they're purposely trying to trick you, and it just pisses me off. Okay, so you just burn this into your memory. This is never correct, ever, ever, ever. And this is confusing because except for in this context, right, we like apostrophes work all the same way, but with it, and that word, the rule is completely different, and it's just so annoying. So typically when we have apostrophe S, it's possessive, right? So it's meaning that like it's knows, if that's what we had after this word, right? It's knows. The knows belonged to it, right? That's how it usually works, but not with this word. This is an exception, so that's why it gets so confusing and why they're trying to trip you up. So it's wrong to say the company claims it's illegal to use its name that way. These should be swapped, okay? Because this is not a possessive apostrophe with the word its. We see it that way because with other words, if there's an apostrophe S, it's a possessive, but with it, it's a different rule, and that's why they're testing you on it. So every single time, 100%, IT apostrophe S means it is, okay? IT apostrophe S 100% of the time means it is. It's a contraction, all right? And that's why the rule doesn't apply. So it's the only word where ITS, that is the possessive. Okay, so the company claims it is illegal, right? So we need this one to use its name. And this is where this gets tricky, because with other words that have an S on the end, we put the apostrophe out here to be possessive, like the Joneses' house. You would have Jones, maybe you could do an ES, and then some people might even put an apostrophe, like the Jones house, right? And so sometimes that is how we fix the possessive, is with a word with an S at the end, we put it right here, but it doesn't work that way. So just remember that with it has its own rule when it comes to the apostrophe S and when it comes to possession. All right, you just need to kind of remember that. So this is never a word. This always, always, always means it is. Okay, and this is the possessive, when usually a possessive has an apostrophe. So hopefully that makes sense, but this question pisses me off because they're just trying to catch you. Go ahead.
If you're like talking about like a dog's nose and you're like, oh, look at its nose, you wouldn't use an apostrophe at all?
No, it's this right here.
Wow.
Mind blowing, right? I know. Yep. And partially, I like to, this is like, doesn't like, this like looks like a wrong word, like ITS. I'm like, that's not a word. Like it like just looks kind of awkward to me, right? But yeah, ITS is the possessive. Its nose would be this one. Because name, its name, right? The company's name, the name belongs to the company. It's, but this is the wrong it's, but it looks right, doesn't it? It should be its name with no apostrophe.
I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it, IT apostrophe S, can't you think about it as it is?
Yeah, and just, yep, that's exactly what I would do. I would just see IT apostrophe S 100% of the time is it is always. It's never possessive. And just memorize that, and then you'll be good. But I guarantee they're going to have this ITS apostrophe. I guarantee they're going to have that as an option. It's never wrong. Like this, I mean, excuse me, it's always wrong. This doesn't exist. That's never the right answer. ITS apostrophe.
But you can have, like, let's say somebody's like last name was like Jones. You can have like Jones apostrophe, right? Like,
yeah, there's a couple. You could do like Joneses. Like, so I think it's I believe it's grammatically correct to say JONES. Like you will put another ES, like it'll be Joneses with an ES, but you also can do Jones with just an apostrophe, JONES apostrophe. Both of those I think are possessive. So that's where it gets tricky, because most words, this counts.
Yeah.
That's and they want you to know that, and that's why they're trying to trip you up.
Cool. Okay.
So that's a annoying one, but it's also one where it's like, it's not super, once you get it, right? So that's when you just memorize IT apostrophe S is always, it is, and ITS apostrophe doesn't exist. You're going to get those questions right. If you have that down, you know that without a shadow of a doubt, like in the middle of the test, you're going to get those questions right. And they could have more than one of these. So it's like annoying, but it's also, once you get it, which is kind of a relief. And it sounds like you guys are getting it. Okay. All right. We're going to keep going. Okay. There are an hour. All right. These are big. Okay. Guys, you just got to remember there, and there. You've just got to. Okay. Guys, I hate grammar. I don't teach a lot of grammar because I think most of the time grammar doesn't matter and we worry about it too much. And like, it's really like, I'm not too worried. I just don't think it's super important. And some of my English teachers that I teach with would think I'm crazy. But I categorize things for my students and in my own head as big grammar and little grammar. And big grammar for me is like the stuff that could keep you from getting hired. Big grammar is the stuff that should never be in an email at work. Big grammar should never be a grammar mistake you make on a job resume. Like, big grammar is the stuff that like even the common adult is going to be like, oh, that's not the way you spell that, right? So big grammar is the stuff that can make you look stupid with the average person, and little grammar is the stuff that the average person doesn't care about and doesn't recognize, and so why do we worry about it? That's kind of how I feel. This is big grammar, guys. There, and there. Lots of people struggle with it, but more people get it than who struggle with it. And so if you use the wrong one on a job application, in an email, it's following up for a job interview, like, it shows that you're just not being careful and not being thoughtful, right? And it could it could hurt you. Like it's big grammar, okay? So you just got to know it. There, there, there. So the first there, over there. There is possessive, their car, their classroom, their house. It belongs to them, multiple people, okay? And then they are. And again, this is coming back to the singular they, right? And I know that gets a little bit messy that it can be singular, but they still are used a little bit differently, right? So they are, their, possessive, even if it's a single person, right? And then there. Okay, but just remember with the single person, you want to be careful with that on ACT because they're still stuck in the Stone Age when it comes to those pronouns, okay? Then our and our, they lump these in as the same, but they're a little different. This is really common because it just depends on the pronunciation. A lot of people say our and our. A lot of times they pronounce those the same depending on kind of like the family that you come from. And so because people sometimes pronounce these two words the exact same, it makes us trip it up when we're writing. We stumble on that, okay? So there was a fly in their car. Those should be swapped, right? There, over there was a fly in their car, right? So that's why that one's wrong. They are going to our cabin. So that one's correct. Okay, so hopefully that one's straightforward enough. Now, this one's another one kind of like the its that you can just memorize, okay? First, sang and sung are words, okay? So those are words, those are grammatically correct. She sang, they sung, okay? But brang and brung are never words. But people say it like that, right? Yeah, he brung along his little brother on the trip. I was so mad, right? Okay, so we hear that. Maybe some of you are like, I never hear that. Okay, but my family's from the South and I hear it all the time, okay? So just be aware of that. And that's what makes it confusing because sang and sung are words, brang and brung are not. It's brought, okay? It's brought is the past tense of bring. So as long as you know that and you're like, duh, right? Maybe that's how some of you are feeling and that's fine. But it's confusing because, again, this is an exception to a weird rule and we just see sang and sung and we assume bring and brung, but no. Okay, we're almost there, guys.
When would you ever use sang instead of sung?
Sang, I believe, is plural, is singular. She sang a song last night instead of they sung a song.
What if you're using I? Would it be I sang a song, not I? And then it would be I've sung that song?
I think that would still be sang. I think sang is singular and sung is plural. But I'm not 100% on that. I'm like 95% on that.
Well, right there, it says that I've sung that
Oh,
song.
let me see.
Yeah, the PowerPoint says that.
Oh, it does. I've sung. Well, let's just Google that real quick. I'm glad you guys are pointing that out. You guys are like awake and with it.
Not trying to be annoying, but
No, you guys need to know. You're not being annoying. No, I am completely comfortable with me being an English teacher and not knowing all the grammar stuff. Let's see. And I got this from ACT. Like a lot of my PowerPoints is like I pieced together stuff from ACT. So I'm worried that I'm teaching you wrong. So we just need to find out. Past tense of sing is sang. It's not she sung the anthem, but she sang. Okay, so sung is the past participle. See, this is where it gets into messy grammar stuff. This is probably why I didn't know it, but let's just jump there so you guys have it. Let's see. Oh, well, that's not what we want. We want a few more examples of past participle. Here we go. All right. Getting some weird ads there, sorry. Let's see. So saying is the past, intransitive verb. Yeah, so it's got like some weird things. Let's see. Past participle may not be an own, so the helping verb, to have, to be. Sung is used in the past tense as well as the perfect. Okay, we just want some example sentences. Here we go. I'm getting more weird ads. All right, let's see here. How do I get out of that? Oh, yeah, this is, can you see how kind of confusing this is? Let's see. Maybe let me see if I can find a YouTube video. That might be helpful for all of our brains. I want to make sure I'm getting it right, and that's probably my brain capacity right now. Maybe you guys, do you guys feel that where you're like, I feel lazy, I'm just going to find a video of this. It's only 39 seconds and it doesn't have saying, so I'm not. Sorry, you guys. Let's see. Let me here. Yeah, let me dig on this after, and I'll dig when I'm not taking up your guys' time, and then I'll just contact Helen, and I'll find a good video or a good article, and I'll send that to you guys, maybe with some explanation. Does that work okay? And then I don't have to waste your guys' time digging and finding an easy way. But it does, I think your guys are right. It's not what I was saying, so I'm glad you called me out on it. It's more to do with different types of past tense.
Yeah,
so in certain past tense, go ahead.
I think I found an example. Like I've sang in a choir. I have sang in a choir.
I have.
Yeah, yep. Is past tense, and then I've sung in a choir is current time.
Yeah, so
it would be present tense.
Yeah. So the I have is what I think makes the difference, because it's still past tense, but it's a different type of past tense. And if you guys think about like your Spanish classes or like your French or your language classes, right, there's different types of past tense. And that's the difference. But I want to find like a bunch of examples to be I've sung or I sang, and to show you guys like the difference. So let me dig, but that is helpful, right? The have is significant, but I want to know if it's just the have or are there other things. I want to make sure you guys have the difference between that. However, I will point out that this is specifically going to try and trick you on brang and brung. Okay, so they don't have necessarily, they're not likely, I don't want to say never, but their question is not necessarily testing you on when to use sang and sung. Their questions are going to hope that you catch that brang and brung are supposed to be brought. Okay, so I'll still send you this information because there could be a question, but this being like the research saying this is, Chase, just unmute yourself and jump in if you've got something to share, because I think I need to
I think we're out of time, actually.
Yeah, I was told I can keep, I'm keep and going until 3:45. So Helen, do you want to pipe in? We are at 3:11 and I saw that. We've only got a couple more slides. That's
so you have time because you're just going to continue on with the last topic with the tips and tricks.
That's what I thought.
You've got time. And we're not taking a break. We're just going to go straight through and be done.
That's what I thought. So sorry, was it Brian, I think, who raised his hand? So anyways, so I'll still send you the sang and brang, the sang and sung stuff, but really the question that kids trip up on is the brought. Okay, so just make sure you have that down. Okay, and you guys are thorough, keeping me on my toes. I love it. Okay, this next one is also kind of some verb tense stuff. And essentially this is what they're wanting to, I think they're wanting you to know specifically with to be verb and when to conjugate it. So I think about this as like my Spanish verbs when they're irregular, right? They're wanting you to know all the English irregular verb conjugations, and be and was, right, are some of those, right? So I am, we are, they are, I was, we were, right? The plurals of them, but also like all these different tenses, which are tricky. Okay, so again, this is something that I think for most of you being fluent English speakers, you can just hear, right? And you just know if it's supposed to be he was instead of he were, right? I think you guys can tell the difference, or we will have been living in the US for this long or whatever, right? Compared to that, these other conjugations. So again, this is something that is complex, but I think you hearing it will be enough and you'll be good. But I have that all kind of mapped on there on the slide for you in case that's something you're like, yeah, I should probably study that. But if you feel confident on knowing when these are conjugated, depending on the tense, but also depending on the plural versus singular, you'll be okay. All right. Then we have ing endings when they aren't needed. This is, again, I think a more straightforward one, but it's one that kids miss. And so just kind of be aware of it. So it's wrong, obviously, to say, when I left for the store, I was forgetting my list. Because when is, oh, let me get my laser pointer back here. When is the past tense and the ing is current, is present, right? So the tenses don't match there, right? When I left, and left, right? Sorry, not when, I meant to say left. Left is past tense, forgetting is present. And guys, I see this so much in my kids' writing. So you need to make sure that a sentence and was is past tense, right? You need to make sure that they're either all the verbs in a sentence are in the same tense. So when I left, so you could say, when I was leaving for the store, right? I was forgetting my list, but even that sounds a little bit awkward. It really just kind of needs to sound correct and the tenses need to match. So as long as the tenses match, you will be fine, even if it sounds a little off. All right, so when I left the store, I forgot. Forgot is past tense, left is past tense, you're good. Okay, so again, that'll be one that sounds awkward that I think you guys will catch. And then just make sure the tenses match within a sentence, okay? All right, okay, last three. All right, so this one's starred because I think we say this wrong all the time. So again, this is one of those stupid grammar rules that I hope they don't all keep on their test forever, but technically grammar, this is the rule. If you have one person, they are fast. If you have two people, the one is faster than the other. And if you have three or more, they are the fastest. And we don't say it like this. So it's wrong to say Bob is the fastest of the two runners. That is grammatically incorrect. I know that's so stupid, but it is. It is grammatically incorrect because technically, according to these grammarian people, you cannot be the fastest if there's only two of you. I know, it doesn't make sense. I know, okay? So it's right to say they are the faster of the two runners, which sounds weird. That's why this one's starred, okay? So just remember this rule: fast, faster, fastest. So they'll try and trick you on this. There'll be a couple questions on this, and it won't be necessarily the word fast, right? But it'll be a verb that's similar, and you just need to know when it's grammatically correct to have an ER ending, depending on the people that they're comparing, and when it's correct to have the EST ending if it's three or more.
What about better and best?
Better and best, yeah, it'd be the same thing if it was people, right? So and they would have to qualify that in the sentence, and they will, because that's what they're testing you on. So if it was better and best, that's what you said, yeah. So it would be she is better than him, right? But then it would be she is the best in the class, because class is more than two. So the same rules apply. Okay, so kind of a weird one. Then between and among, this is a little bit tricky, but I think once you get it, you get it. So essentially think about this as like a physical space. If we were in the same room together, I'd be walking around and making like a visual for you, but you're gonna have to do that on your own this time. So it's wrong to say I will walk among the two halves of the class, because grammarians are saying that you can't be among two things. Among means like in the middle, completely surrounded by, and they're claiming that you can't be among two things, you're between two things. So you can be among a lot of things, right? Like I was among the trees in the forest, right? But you can't be between unless it's two. And a lot of times we say among with two, and you technically can't. So just do between is 2 and among is more than 2. Between has 2 E's. That's what helps me remember the rule. So a between versus among, between is always going to be 2, which I think we say it that way, but you just have to remember that among cannot be 2. You cannot be among 2 things, technically, according to grammar. Okay, last one. This is also just, you just got to memorize this one, but we say it wrong all the time. We are saying this with countable, not measurable. Okay, countable. That's the trick on how to remember this. Not measurable. So just get the word measurable out of your head for now. So if you have less of something, you can only have less of something if it is physically impossible to count it. So water. Okay. You cannot count water. We measure it. All right. And then fewer would be countable. So here's our example. I have fewer water than I thought, so I can fill less buckets. Buckets are a physical thing that I can count easily, right? But water, I cannot count. I can measure, but that's different, right? Also, I like to use sand. If it was just sand, it would be less sand unless it was grains of sand, which I think that's kind of impossible. But if they're being that specific and they're qualifying and being that specific and saying grains of sand, that kind of implies that they have like used a magnifying glass or something and they're actually measuring the grains of sand, which is psycho. But we don't really say grains of sand, right? So if we're just saying sand, then like just sand in general, that one's the kind of a messier one. But just remember, countable, uncountable. So physically countable. Measurable is different than countable. Remember that. Okay. So less is for uncountable, fewer is for countable stuff. Make sense? Okay, so that is officially the end of the English. So Helen, if you want to stop your recording there, we just finished, but that is the English. So I'm going to go out of screen share and just ask for a few questions. I want to get you guys done on time, so we can do questions all the way at the end. Get rid of my laser pointer here. But I will stop sharing and I'll pull up the chat and just make sure. So any English questions real quick, and then we're going to jump into what to expect on test day and some extra tips. It's okay. I'm not going to go back and read the whole chat. Don't worry. I don't have time for that. Any questions? You guys can just type it at the bottom of the chat. I should read the whole thing. Oh, you guys, I get enough exposure to that kind of stuff. Oh, okay. Isaac, I won't. Okay. Are we ready to jump in then? Okay. All right. That's a yes. I'm taking it. Let me pull